Good people YouTube, I'm the watch idiot. So you want a new, affordable, medium-sized Seiko diver around 38 to 40 millimeter range. Not too much to ask. And so what kind of options do you actually have? We pretty much have nothing. Finally, Seiko has answered my prayers with this SNE569P1. So yeah, 38 millimeters, check. 10.7 millimeters thin, check. 20 millimeter lug width, check. Drilled lugs, check. Black dial, check. And the biggest check of all, gray bezel, check. So in this video, I'm gonna go over the details of this incredible watch, and then I'm gonna be talking about obviously whether or not I can recommend it. And the answer to that question was actually a lot more complex than I originally thought it would be. So let's get into it. So the most important numbers are the ones that I mentioned in the intro, and that's the 38 millimeter case with which is actually the bezel, because the case is ever so slightly smaller than that. And then there is the 10.7 millimeter thickness, which is just next level when it comes to comfort and then just overall wearability, and also just the wearability with a whole bunch of different straps, because it doesn't sit very high on the wrist as it is. And even if you throw on a NATO strap with the 2 layers underneath it, it's not going to raise the watch that much higher off the wrist, like at all. So and then in terms of how it wears on the wrist, it is a bit smaller than a Black Bay 58 and also a bit smaller than an Alpinist as well. And that's really mostly down to the size of the bezel being a little bit wider, and the dial is consequently smaller, and obviously the entire watch is just a little bit smaller anyway. But yeah, this sort of size is, you know, absolutely great for me, and I know that is going to work on a whole bunch of wrists for sure. So yeah, I mean, all this put together makes for a watch that is just about perfect for me, and it is seriously one of the most comfortable watches I've owned, especially, you know, on that elastic strap. It's mind-bending. Okay, so the dial and hands are exceptionally done here, because the black sunburst dial is actually really well done over here, because you can actually see the sunburst effect in the grain on the dial, and it doesn't look matte, which is a problem that a lot of cheaper watches have. And the indices are very crisp, so they pair very well with a very crisp dial. They're slightly raised because of the lume, with a white surround, and because they're raised, that means that there's a lot of good old Lumi Bright in there, so it does live up to the expectations, which is awesome, just because I am a small child when it comes to how excited I get with lume, you know, just glowing brightly when I come inside from when I'm outside, or when it's just dark and I just see it glowing there. So there is a date at the 3 o'clock position, which is, you know, entirely inoffensive, I guess. And there's a lume pip actually to the right of that, and it is really nice that it's there, because I think it fills up a space where there would have been a lot of negative space. Okay, so now onto the hands, and I think that these hands look amazing, and I love that they do look like Seiko hands, but at least to my knowledge, they don't look like they're just off the shelf, although they pretty much are. But they look good. They look different from all the rest of my Seiko hands. And also I really like that they are partially skeletonized at the bottom, which, you know, once again adds to that unique feeling. And yeah, in terms of proportions, the hands are pretty much, you know, as good as it gets, just because they do reach the ends of, well, at least the seconds and the minute hand, obviously. They do reach the outer edges of the indices, and the overall visual weight of the hands compared to the dial and the indices are, once again, pretty much spot on. And oh, in final amazing little detail is that the hands are brushed, and well, at least the hour and minute hand, the seconds hand is polished. But I do think that this elevates the watch immensely, because it just gives it a look of quality. And given that the overall aesthetic is sort of gray and steely and tooly and stuff like that, the brushing is just a perfect choice. Oh, and also one big thing is that finally the seconds hand hits each of the minute markers perfectly. So no worries on that end, which is great, especially considering my less than great experience with my Tissot PRX, but I did solve that problem. Okay, so on to the case, and the case is simple, you know, not as curvy as the other cases from Seiko, but it is ridiculously comfortable on the wrist. And a big part of that is because the lugs gently curve down beyond the case back. So it comes down over here, and that really helps the case back, you know, hug the wrist. So yeah, the brushing on the case is consistent and smooth, looks very nice, and that helps elevate the watch. And to, you know, help further elevate the watch, there is a bevel running along the top of the sides of the case. And yeah, I mean, this little detail I just love on seeing on any watch, just because it just gives a little bit of a extra flair and extra visual interest. But unfortunately in this case, the transitions between the brushed, polished, and brushed surfaces isn't very sharp, you know, which is a bit of a miss, just considering that, you know, there are other watches at this price point and a little bit less than this that do manage to get it right. So, you know, it's neither here nor there, I guess. And also, one of my favorite features of the watch is that it has drilled lugs, and it makes me so happy because taking off bracelets on my SKXs with those stupid shoulderless spring bars is an absolute nightmare. I hate it, absolutely hate doing it. So the next thing that really surprised me is when I found out that the crystal is a sapphire crystal. And I think that this actually might be the cheapest Seiko with sapphire crystal. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, you know, because I think it might be. It is a nice little surprise, and I know that is gonna make a lot of people very happy. Okay, so now on to the bezel, and yeah, the bezel has its own section just because honestly, this was the critical X factor for me, and that's because it has a gray bezel insert, and for some reason, I mean, it's not really seen very often on watches. And yeah, for those who don't know, I really love gray, you know, as you can see, and I talked about last week on my Hodinkee Ors Diver 65 video, and also on my Black Bay 925 videos as well. But each of those have their own issues that kind of take away from the grayness of the overall watch. And thankfully that is not the case over here, because this is my absolute favorite color combination of pretty much any watch: a black dial and a gray bezel. And I actually love that combo so much that I bleached my SKX 007 bezel to make it gray, and now it's just insanely good. And the nice thing about it is that they didn't do just a standard gray aluminum bezel. They have this super cool sort of concentric circle pattern, and it really looks great, and it's something that I've noticed a lot in different lights. Also, this is something that I noticed only after a few days with it, but the minute marks between 0 and 15 are a bit longer than the rest of the minute markers, which is a pretty cool little detail that they thought of. And I guess to emphasize the first 15 minutes of a dive that none of these watches are ever gonna go on. Yeah, the bezel itself has a sort of big coin edge grip, and it is pretty grippy. Oh, and then in terms of bezel feel, I mean, it is, you know, just the classic Seiko springy feel, and let's actually just listen to it right now. But to bring this down a notch, the bezel is slightly misaligned, which is, you know, at this point almost endearing, I guess, because I mean, it wouldn't be a Seiko if it wasn't misaligned, right? Okay, so now on to the bracelet, and this is kind of where, you know, the watch is let down a little bit. This is pretty much the same standard bracelet that's found on the Seiko Turtles that I had, and it has these, you know, single piece links that are made to not look like they're a single piece. And I mean, it's not awful. I mean, the center links are raised up a little bit, which isn't really seen very much on other watches. And additionally, the sides of those raised center links are polished to give it a little bit more definition, and you know, it does give it a nice look, I guess. Also, thankfully, all the links are solid, but unfortunately the end links are not solid. They are hollow, which was a pretty big disappointment for me when I first saw it. That being said though, I will say that the hollow end links are super solid, and they really don't look or feel like they're hollow end links when you see it on the wrist, which is a really great thing. But I mean, I still want solid end links regardless. Also, the deployment clasp from the outside, you know, looks okay. You know, it does its thing, but it does have the, you know, the cheap looking pressed metal clasp in the inside, and I really do think that it should have been milled. But you know, once again, I mean, it does its job well enough. I mean, it feels secure. Oh, and then also it's got the questionable diver's extension at the end there too. The part that makes it all a little bit more irritating is that the MSRP on this watch is, I think, about $500, which is expensive. At that price, you absolutely should have everything solid. You just should. I mean, many micro brands do that for half the price, so there's no reason why Seiko shouldn't be able to do it as well. Thankfully, I got mine for $360, so I do feel better about the situation. And also because in the end, I mean, the bracelet does feel solid and does feel relatively well built as well. I'm just hoping that this watch becomes super popular and Uncle Seiko and Strapcode make a few bracelets for this, because at that point, I mean, it would be absolutely next level. And oh man, I can only imagine what this is gonna look like with a 4mm taper. I mean, so yeah, this is a giant topic, and I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, you know, on homages, you know, replicas, fakes, things like that. So I think the details will come in a video after this. And although I am kind of scared of doing a video on the topic, considering what happened to Jody from Just One More Watch, but yeah, I mean, let me know what you guys think, and if you guys would just like to hear my thoughts on homages. But going back to the watch, and when it first got released, I legit only saw it as a really cool 38mm quartz diver from Seiko. That's it. And this continued on all the way until after I ordered the watch, and it was when I was looking at other websites and the photos that they had that it kind of just dawned on me that, you know, yeah, I mean, it does, you know, look a bit like a Submariner. So while I don't see this as a direct homage to the Submariner, I can definitely see how this is a homage in the truest sense of the word, meaning that it's paying homage to the Submariner by interpreting the Submariner's style through Seiko's design language. Paying homage to a watch doesn't mean completely ripping off said watch. That's not how you honor someone or something. I mean, at that point, that watch would be considered a replica watch, or at least it should be considered a replica watch. And I think that a replica watch should not mean a fake watch, because those are two very different things. But obviously the definition has been set, and replica means fake, even though I don't think that those should be equivalent. So going back to the Seiko, so if you take each element on its own, like the hands, the case, the bezel, whatever it is, none of them look directly like the Submariner. And actually, from a lot of angles in general, it doesn't look at all like a Submariner. But when you do put everything together and you look at it straight at the dial, it does resemble a Submariner. So yeah, it's up to you whether you like it like that or not. So is it worth buying? And this was actually a far more difficult question to answer, you know, than I had originally thought, because at first I thought this was just gonna be an absolute no-brainer, and that's just because I fell in love with it pretty much immediately. But I'm not sure if this is gonna be for everyone. So there's no hiding that I absolutely love Seiko. At one point I had, I think, 12 Seikos in the collection before I sold some, and obviously when this came out, this, you know, just checked every single box, and it looked great, and it had a great bezel. So obviously it was great, and it just blew my mind. And I finally, you know, made my way, and I wanted it so badly that I, you know, went to a website that I've never been to, and where they were selling it for $360, and I bought it from there. By the way, I have the link to the watch from that website down below, just because their customer service, the iomobile.com, their customer service and just the overall experience was just next level. So yeah, definitely give it a go. And also, I'm not sponsored in any way by them or anything like that. They don't know I'm doing this, and you know, I bought it with my own money. But you know, I just want to help out anyone who is looking for this watch. And yeah, it's just, you know, I guess going back to the main topic, that it's not worth $500 for sure, but $360, it is pretty good. So yeah, and expanding on, you know, who should get it, is that I think this is going to be a watch for someone who is at the very least partial to Seiko. You know, someone who can look past those common shortcomings of Seiko to see how great the watch is by itself, especially at that improved price of $360. But, you know, for those who, you know, maybe aren't as keen on Seiko, then I'm not sure if this is the watch to make you fall in love with Seiko, and maybe, especially if this is your first Seiko, maybe you should look at some other classic Seikos. So yeah, there you have it. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about the watch and, you know, about homages and stuff like that. But yeah, as always, hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, just because it helps the channel a lot. And also check out my other videos if you want to see what I'm all about, and then hit the subscribe button and then the notification bell while you're at it, just to stay up to date. And yeah, until the next video, good day.